My name is Jim Knight. This is Coaching Conversations. Today, my conversation partner is Dr. Paul Bloomberg. Paul, I've got a little bio I'm going to read of you, but I just want to say I've wanted to have this conversation for a long time, and I'm just thrilled that I get to learn with you. And there's so many things that overlap with what we do. So I'm excited and grateful for your time. It's going to be a real fun conversation. I am ready to learn a ton. I really think it's going to be a great opportunity for me to learn because you're doing such great stuff. But I better read my little bio I've got right here and highlight a few things. I'm honored to be here. Oh, it's great to have you. So Paul is the founder and CEO of the Core Collaborative Learning Network that many of you probably know, based in San Francisco and New York City. The Core Collaborative mission is to expand learner ownership and agency through building a culture of belonging and efficacy through collaborative inquiry. And the Core Collaborative defines learner as all the people in a system who partner with students. The Core Collaborative strives to cultivate learners who embody empathy, open-mindedness, patience, perseverance, who use their energy and expertise to make a positive impact in the world that we share with each other. And Paul's the co-author of the best-selling book, Leading Impact Teams, a lead author on peer power with the awesome cover you can see over Paul's shoulder there. Unite, Learn, Prosper, Activate, an assessment revolution through, published through Mimi and Todd Press. A lead author on Empower Ed, Learner, a toolkit, e-toolkit, sorry. Yep. And he's done several successful school turnaround efforts and believes that public education must play a major role in deconstructing systems of oppression. Serves on the board of the National Parents Union. The National Parents Union, if you don't know, is a network of highly effective parent organizations and grassroots advocates across the country that's united behind a set of common goals and principles to channel the power of parents. He lives with his husband, Tony, in California. Alex and Taylor, Tony and Paul's sons, are the inspiration behind the launching of the Core Collaborative, which is now changing the world and doing really great things. So well,
we hope so.
I know it's true. I know it's true. I hear it all the time. And not only am I excited to have this conversation, but many on our team are excited to hear this conversation because we have such respect for you. So it's great to have you here.
Back at you.
And so we start off with this basic question: what's something people don't know about you? So let's go there. So what's something most people wouldn't know about you?
I was thinking about that when I saw that question come through my email today. And I think that a lot of people don't know is I have my master's in music performance, and I was a saxophone player up until almost my early 30s. Played in Carnegie Hall, played in North Sea Jazz Festival, Montreux, Switzerland Jazz Festival, played in Aspen Music Festival and a opera orchestra, 21st century opera orchestra, of course. And did that for since third grade. That was my whole life. And just didn't feel like it was enough to make a difference. I think my parents raised me to want to do something greater, although I think musicians make huge impact. It just wasn't right for me, but I take what I've learned into everything that I do. That's for sure. Formative assessment and playing an instrument kind of are like the same thing.
Well, I think teaching is a lot like jazz, and presenting is a lot like jazz. You know, you have to riff off of what the other people are doing, and you have to improvise in the moment. But especially presenting, there's a structure, but the structure can look different every day. And yeah, so that's very, very cool. We'll have to have this 5 desert island conversation sometime. What albums you'd take to a desert island? So
okay, yeah, that'll be a good one.
Yeah,
I don't know if I can pick.
Coltrane's always on my list. So
yeah, I'm with you on that
one. So what the second question, just to open things up, is what are you grateful for right now?
Well, obviously my health, my parents' health, my husband's mom's health, our kids' health, but my son, Taylor, is now sober for 3 years, and we got a little text from him last week, and I think that made my century and Tony's century, and then our son Alex, who lost his job in the pandemic, just having the means to be able to hire him and be able to find something that would empower him, and something that both our sons really struggled through school. And I think just being able to partner with him over the last 3 months has been really fun to see him thrive. He already started doing a certificate program in digital marketing, and he did that all on his own, and it was shocking. So I think in terms of just seeing both of our sons thrive and try to like figure life out and be productive and give back, they're just really cool kids. So
it's a wonderful thing. And parenting is such a I don't know how you feel, but I've always felt like I could have done that better. You know, I always felt like, oh man, that was not my greatest success, you know, and I'm still parenting and trying to get better. But I guess we could say that about a lot of things. There's always room for improvement. Getting better is what it's all about. So
yeah, parenting, I think, is the hardest thing out there outside of being a principal, because that was really hard.
Right. It's just the unpredictability of things. You don't know what the influences will be. My partner, Jenny, and I, we talked about this just the other night, how everything can go right and still something can go wrong. And then other people are really hands off, and it's just a, parents deserve a lot of empathy. That's for sure. It's beautiful. I wouldn't want to live life without kids. I would, and I'm not judging people who make that choice. I can understand that choice, but but it's a richly rewarding, complex, and difficult job. You know?
It's a balancing act, isn't it? Like you never know what to really do.
That's right. Or did I do that one right? Or it's like teaching. There's always one more thing. There's always something to feel guilty about.
There's always a next step.
So I first heard about you. We were just talking about this at a conference in Santa Barbara. I got to see you present on in leading impact teams. So tell us a bit. I just want to do kind of like, I guess we could call this an intellectual travelogue. Yeah. Let's talk through. Tell me a bit about what an impact team is, and what do I need to know to understand what an impact team is? Yeah,
I mean, I think Barb, my co-author, and I were at the time working, well, way prior to that, we're working for Doug Reeves, and we were leads for data teams. And at that point, it was really ahead of its time, where you're using data to make decisions. And Barb and I became really close. But as we were circling the country and working with teams, we're like, something was really missing. And it was always like the learner part. It was everything was focused on data and accountability, but there wasn't a real focus on what it meant to be a learner. And I had just, prior to that, I was really lucky to work with the staff in Southern California. Our school was in program improvement, and we really focused on goal setting at the student level. And Barb and I were talking about that, and we were really big fans of Stiggins' work, forever. And we're like, how do we bring what really quality formative assessment is, which is a process, and then how do we merge it with, DeFore and Eaker's work, who we loved, and like, how do we bring two things together? And then Barb happened to be friends with John Hattie, and so I think I became a visible learning consultant with her, and then it just, things kind of worked out, where like it was like a Reese's peanut butter cup, I don't know. And it's really all about, our goal with impact teams is to develop academic capacity, social capacity, and emotional capacity. And like the number one goal is for kids to take ownership of their learning through self-impaired assessment and goal setting. But that would apply to like anything. It could be it could be emotional intelligence and kids acknowledging, how they feel and what their next step is. It could be around, collaboration. It could be around academic goals. So like, we've really tried to broaden it, because we don't believe that learning is just about learning the standards. There's a lot more to it than that. I think the pandemic has really taught us that. And then it was really also about growing stronger partnerships with teachers, and like flattening like the organizational structure from like a top-down approach to a more flat approach. And that would mean also in the classroom. reducing power structures in the classroom around partnerships with kids.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it was born out of all that. And it was just kind of a thing that grew over 6 or 7 years. Even prior to Corwin, we were piloting the work for 3 years all across the country. So
Mm-hmm.
it was an evolution.
I wonder, it's interesting to listen to your sort of history. So I was lucky enough to work with Michael Fullen at the University of Toronto, and
Lucky.
I lived in Toronto, and I said to him, and he was my mentor, and so I'd go meet him periodically. I had to tape record the conversations because he had so many smart things to say, and I couldn't keep up. So I would tape record it and then go back and pause the tape and mull that one over before I got to the next one. He's brilliant. But I said to him, like, who are the 3 people I need to know who can help me understand the future of professional development? And he said, well, Rick DeFore, Stephanie Hirsch, and Rick Stiggins. And so I called them up and I went to visit them. And I visited Rick a few times, and he was extremely generous with his time, helpful, really. And I wonder if he understands, or for that matter, Stephanie or DeFore or Michael Fullen, I wonder if they understand the impact they have on people.
Yeah.
Just in little ways. I mean, my life is different because of those few conversations I had with Rick DeFore.
Yeah, Barb and I always talk about how we stand on the shoulder of giants, and there's all these people that come before you that help you to evolve and to get to a different place. And I feel like that's still happening, and now I think for me, it's happening with parents across the country, just trying to understand their struggles.
Right. Well, speaking of the shoulders of giants, so you talked about Hattie, and Hattie has popularized the importance of collective efficacy. He said a lot about it, building on, in particular, that one unpublished dissertation. And so tell us a bit about what collective efficacy is from your perspective, why it's important, and I'll just cram as much into one question as possible. Why it's important, and then how do your impact teams foster collective efficacy? But first off, what is it? Why is it important?
Yeah, I think it really starts with self-efficacy, and I think we've even had an evolution since you've seen us last,
right?
Where even the way that we unpack the work slowly in systems is really more like John Cronapple and Floyd Cobb's work, where it's more of an inside-out process, because we really believe if you don't understand your own self-efficacy and the sources of self-efficacy, it's hard to kind of grapple with collective efficacy. And so I think it's like understanding that, building confidence in someone and understanding the sources of that and creating a safe place physiologically, psychologically, making sure that we have lots of models of success so we can learn vicariously through one another, setting ambitious goals and getting coaching and feedback so we have those mastery experiences, that release serotonin and make us feel good and want more. And I think I've really changed the way I even think about collective teacher efficacy, because I think I was functioning too much on the system level and not thinking enough about the individual. And so I think the work now has been more about understanding that our individual efficacy, I could have high efficacy in math. I mean, I do not have high efficacy in health, as you know, because you just gave me a vegan cheese. So I've always struggled with my health and understanding that efficacy is contextualized. But then I think when you take it to the collective, then I think trust becomes more of an issue where, building relational trust within a system and removing power. And I was the victim of a school being labeled program improvement. So I've been the victim of top-down approaches that just really degraded people and didn't make them feel confident. And then I think, creating goals together, like co-constructing everything with teachers and parents and kids, and knowing that the shifts that you're going to make in a system have to be co-constructed. So co-constructed isn't just something that we do to do it, it's to bring people in to build partnership. So I think that is pretty integral to collective teacher efficacy along with relational trust. But then I think all of our work is based on positive organizational scholarship. And so I've been really influenced by that body of research. And Dr. Alan Daly was my dissertation chair at UC San Diego. And so he was my Michael Fullen. And so he was really involved in social network theory and got me really interested in positive organizational scholarship and appreciative inquiry, and how when we appreciate one another's strengths and I can identify those strengths and name them, then we can apply them to areas of need, in a system. So I think a lot of our work is merging a lot of different bodies of research that really just interested me, because I just have always worked in what was labeled low performing schools and saw how that label degraded and just made people feel horrible. And then I think that you take that label around grading and test scores and labeling kids. And so I think it all kind of goes together for me. But for me, it's just about creating a system that's really compassionate, that you care about one another and that you're scaling up your strengths together.
Yeah, it's a little crazy to think you can bully people into collective efficacy, because you're not going to have much collective efficacy without self-efficacy. And self-efficacy isn't something you get talked into. It's self-efficacy grows out of, hopes that are realized, and having hope, having pathways to your goals, and like you said, a community of support around you and people who see your strengths and affirmation. And we're really influenced by solution-focused coaching. That's a large part of what I like, is that emphasis on, well, what's the positive future you want to see, as opposed to what are you doing wrong? We're a lot more energized by what would you like it to be than what's going wrong.
I like that. We do a lot with our teams around envisioning success. And I think that was like a researcher by the name of Maddox I was reading. And it was like this, what would success look like, feel like, sound like? And we do a lot of that before we even start the work.
Right.
To just build that picture. My mom and dad would have me vision board when I was little. So it would always remind me. It would always remind me of that, because my parents were always really into holistic health, which was really weird.
So what did your vision board look like? Give me a picture of one of your vision boards.
Back then it was Charlie Parker.
Great.
It was John Coltrane. It was Donald Cinta, which was a classical saxophonist from University of Michigan, who I just adored, which was really weird for a kid to be, in love with classical saxophone. But I think it was living in, I remember on my vision board, I didn't know I was gay then, of course, but I knew I didn't want to be married. So whatever that meant. Right. But I had this vision of me living in New York City, and it, like, almost everything that was on that actually happened. Maybe not in the order that I thought it would have happened. I feel like all of this has all been everything from my parents teaching me about vision boarding and doing that into where I am today. It all kind of just makes sense now, looking back.
That's very cool. We'll have to get a little bit of a Love Supreme at this year's Teaching Learning Coaching Conference.
Totally.
That's pretty cool. So you're touching on this, but how do you, and I'm sure it's different every time, but what are some of the things that go into creating a team where people come together productively? We've all experienced unproductive teams where we waste time. And so how do you create a team where good things are happening and learning is taking place and there's positive outcomes for kids as a result of those teachers coming together in the team?
Yeah, I think that was like something that Barb and I were talking about so much. And we kind of ended up realizing that every school has teams that are high performing, and sometimes, you don't see that. But I think when you do appreciative inquiry and you start to really look at the strengths of a school, we realize that every school has extraordinary strength in it. And there's always teams that are extraordinary. And so the way we really start is with some model teams. And we start with teams that are probably would be labeled more high performing by the principal and by the staff. And we start there and we grow from within. And then from there, we teach a lot of different protocols so people learn to listen to one another, because we realize that listening is something that, and I'm kind of a big mouth, so like I need that lesson all the time. But I think we've taught into protocol slowly that teams can use, and then eventually we release it to the team to do on their own. And so it's definitely a gradual release model. We always put the principal in the hot seat. The principal does all the work first, because we really believe if the principal can't navigate the work, how are they going to build capacity at the school? So I think it's just, but it is different in every place.
Right.
And then we always have people fishbowling around us. So like whatever the next new 2 teams are that we're going to work with, they're there, or a couple people from the team. And if we're working at the district level, we'll have district coordinators and directors all around us. So we're all kind of in this together. And that has tended to work really, really well. But it takes, our typical contract is 3 to 5 years.
Right.
So we're in schools for the long term. And I think that is something that's unusual in the world of consulting. I think you experience that too.
Right.
But I don't think a lot do. I think a lot of people go to workshops and they come back, and I don't think your work or our work is like that.
Yeah, we say real learning, it happens in real life. And so the fishbowl would be one way in which you would do that. You would see, well, this isn't a waste of time. We're really looking at how we function as a team, and I'm watching them, and we're learning from them, and then we're going to try this out. And then I suppose the work that people are doing is they're not going through the motions. It's really grounded in what matters in their classroom.
Yeah. And we have 10 protocols. So, and they kind of emerge through teachers, like I think we need this, and we create one for that. But we've really developed the protocols and adapted some that we knew. So teachers would have options as they're engaged in inquiry. What protocol might I use for what, based on what purpose? And I think that has gone a long way, because we didn't want it to be this top-down thing that you followed the script, because that isn't what teaching and learning is. And so we give structure, but not too much.
Right.
That makes sense.
That totally makes sense. My partner, Jenny, she has a phrase that I've stolen with her permission, which is freedom within form. And she says, there's no freedom without structure. If you just say talk whenever you feel like it without the structure, you don't really have freedom, because some people will never speak up. Other people talk all the time. And jazz is like that. There is a structure to the music.
Art is like that. Right. Like if you think of the greatest artists, they broke, a structure and tried to go out without, and then that became the new thing. Yeah. Right.
So if a school district calls you up and says, we want to work with you, what are you going to do? How's that process work for you?
Oh man, it has changed so much in the last 5-6 years, but now we've have some really good surveys that we have created that have gotten better and better with time, and helping to really understand like the school's understanding of standards, because that typically is they don't. And so like that is a major thing. We typically ask them to send us like their best unit maps and things like that, to kind of take a look at like what's going on at the time. We typically will ask them like, what do they think their strengths are? And we'll ask every teacher that. We'll also ask teachers like through a survey to like, what are all the initiatives that they feel like is going on in their school? And we ask them not to ask anybody else that, to just do that individually. And that's always really good information, because you'll usually see that they're under extreme initiative fatigue. Right. And so I think it's through lots of different evidence that we kind of customize a plan for that particular school or district. And many times we'll say, I don't think that this is a good fit right now, because you have so many things going on. There's no way that this could live, and this will operationalize everything that you have going on, and we'll walk away, because we think that that's the ethical and moral thing to do. And 90% of the time they'll be back a year later, or we'll help them to navigate like how to weed the garden, or how to like, are these initiatives real initiatives, or are they just on paper? Are they really
Right.
living? Is there quality implementation of those things? So I think it's kind of a dance for a while, to kind of figure out how to start. I don't know what you all do, but.
Well, I think you're right in, well, I agree with you. That's why I say I think you're right. But nonetheless, I think you want to move away from talk to action. You really want to make sure that what you're doing isn't just nominally happening. And too often what you're doing is, it's just people get the book and they go back to their room and they keep the book, but nothing ever happens. Nothing really changes. So So I think we have a lot we can learn from you about how we get started in the whole process. Your talk in Peer Power, you talk about I want to get this right, peer power revolution with a hashtag in front of it. So what all this is overlapping, I'm sure, but what do you mean by a peer power revolution?
Well, I think it was like kind of by accident. We were really, and on our YouTube channel that I'll share with y'all later, we were really starting to see some really interesting things with our peer assessment work. And it was all by accident. Like, I would like to say that I went in and knew what I was doing, but it wasn't. And we were doing a lot of work with learning progressions and having kids in partnerships identify where they're at on a progression. And then we were starting to put in, with the success criteria that we co-construct with kids, we'd really add concepts that typically wouldn't be in a fifth grade standard. So we'd have the stages of plot development, exposition, climax, rising, all of that. It wasn't in the standard, but we started adding those terms in. And then all of a sudden, because the kids were peer assessing so much and talking about their learning through the lens of the criteria, that we amped up through increased concepts or strengthening sub-concepts under other concepts, that we started to see language acquisition increase. And we started to see all of these things that, as a person that has always devoted their life to English language learners, or now I call them multi-language learners, because I think it's a lot more respectful. We just started seeing all these things on accident happen, where kids just loved it. And they started to engage and love meeting with their partners to dissect their work together. And then the more that we pushed into it, then we'd start integrating with social emotional learning, and kids would start talking about how they were feeling, when they got stuck, and how they could shift that emotional state. And so then the book kind of came from that, that how do we build this in schools? Because number one, the kids were having fun and the teachers just became more motivated to make it better and better and better. And then we thought we wanted a book where, an early literacy teacher, Isaac, donated a chapter. We had teachers donate chapters from all different content areas. I don't know how it turned out. That was the first time we self-published a book, so we didn't really know what we were doing. It all goes back to impact teams, but it's really the practical side. It's the teacher side of it we didn't really have enough of that in the book. And so it kind of grew out of a need. I don't know if that makes sense.
That totally makes sense, but maybe to build on that. So tell me more about what you mean by the teacher student working together as partners and partnership.
Well, what we were really seeing at the secondary level, and from my, Alex and Taylor were the inspiration for everything that we do. Because I have a doctorate in education, and I couldn't help my own sons in a district that I worked in, prior to that.
Right.
And, both our sons are adopted. One is, Hispanic, part Hispanic, and one white, but they were really left behind. And over again, it was because they didn't feel like they belonged. They didn't have one relationship with the teacher that you could say, what's a teacher that you love? It was nothing. We moved them to a charter school, and that became better because they had one teacher for everything, but then they missed their friends. And so is this navigating public education and trying to figure out what to do. And so I think it was well, what can we do in classrooms So kids would feel like their teacher was their partner and that was their ally and was someone that they could rely on for feedback, but not too much. And, and I think it just grew out of, reading Shirley Clark's work, but then more just investigating it with principals in New York at the time, how to integrate the social emotional part into the peer review process. But the partnership just grew and grew and grew and became more and more important in developing self-efficacy to collective efficacy, and then even kids, the partnerships, the efficacy between one another. And so I think it just grew out of demand for wanting, as what John and Floyd would say, honoring the dignity of the kids, So I think it all grew from there.
Well, that's just what I was thinking as you're talking, is that it is the idea of honoring the dignity, or a sort of a negative way to put it is that it's not dehumanizing the students, but seeing them as full human beings, not just objects to be manipulated, but really seeing each individual as a human person who counts. And to recognize the dignity. And part of that has to do with power, power that I'm willing to let kids have some agency over their lives and not just get them to do what I tell them to do. Hey, I've got a quote here, and here's my notes. And
I know I have it right here.
But the quote runs across 2 pages, so I gotta kind of blow my cover here and read it. So it says, and of course it's a long quote. You write that traditional testing practices in the United States are based on instructional and motivational principles that cause many students to give up in hopelessness and accept failure, rather than driving them enthusiastically towards academic success. So tell me about that.
Well, I mean, I think, when you're a principal and a teacher at a Title I school, and you've spent your whole life, doing that, you start to see how that label affects the overall efficacy of the teachers, where when you get that label of whatever it is in any state, because of a test score, it starts to make everyone feel like they don't have the ability to actually make a difference for the people that they're serving. And then those labels, it goes down to the kids and down to the families. And I remember being a principal and just saying, like, we can't blame the families and we can't blame the circumstances. What we can control is what we do within the school day. And we really don't have a lot of control out of anything out of that. So we just have to do the best that we can within the school hours and invite our parents to be partners. But I think, when we have a lot of turnaround stories now under our belt as a collaborative, but, in hearing teachers call kids 1s, 2s, 3s, and 4s, or FBBs and BBs and Bs and Ps and whatever the label is, it just would drive me crazy. And we had kind of a game that if you use one of those labels, you had to put $1 in a bucket. We go on a happy hour at the end of the week, because I just wanted to create symbols of the negative things that we were doing that wasn't really supporting and honoring. Now what I know is honoring the dignity of the kids. At that point, I didn't have that language or that expertise. But I think it just becomes magnified. And in states like Texas and states like New York, you have some states that are so testing heavy that it becomes that is the only thing that matters, at the expense of so many human beings that, just like I saw with my own kids, that would figure out, like, what do I have to do to get a C? Now they've got advanced and proficient on all their California state tests, yet they could barely make it through a class, And so I think that quote is all of that mixed in. That sounds really great. I'm sure we wordsmithed it for a lot, but I think it's because Barb and I wrote every word together, but I just saw my own 2 kids be hopeless. And, they got a bad grade on a test, and then they could never recover, for a whole semester. And so then they would just give up completely.
Right.
And who wouldn't? like who wouldn't? You know?
Yeah. Is the assessment for learning or is the assessment for judging? And is it putting
Yeah.
somebody in a spot or is it helping them grow? And like
Yeah.
the research I've looked at says that if there's a grade and a comment on a paper, kids only look at the grade and they ignore the comment.
It's true.
And so they don't see the grade and they don't see the feedback as feedback to help them grow. It's just feedback often that reinforces their perceptions of a fixed mindset or learned helplessness or however you want to describe it. And really assessment should be building hope because kids can perceive the progress as they move forward. So
Yeah.
that's what I saw all wrapped up in this.
Yeah. And I think that we are just formative assessment junkies.
Yeah.
And we never feel like we do it good enough. It's like one of those things that you could consistently improve. And it's fun. And it's fun to see that kids just flourish and want to grow when you do it right.
So here's my take on that. I think things that are embraced have to be powerful and they have to be easy.
Yeah.
And you can't have one without the other. Easy doesn't mean it doesn't have a really big impact. It has a really big impact, and we've removed as much friction as possible.
Exactly.
So I think in designing things like formative assessment, you can get more precise and you can have better language, but the deeper you go into all the different things you need to know, then you can make it less likely to be implemented. And so to me, the challenge is powerful and easy. That's what I'm always looking for with what I design.
Yeah. I think what's been a running pattern since I've gotten into the consulting world is like everyone says why they like consulting with me and all of our consultants now is that we're really practical. So I think it kind of speaks to that.
Right.
Because we try to make it really easy in the beginning, because we know that they're going to grow into it. But if they don't get some success right away, then it doesn't happen. And so it's really about the hardest schools to navigate are the schools that have adopted the big box curriculums that make everything difficult and hard because there's so many resources and so much stuff that, and some of it isn't even aligned to standards and it doesn't even make any sense. And they call a strategy, some of this stuff doesn't even make sense to me.
Right.
So I think that has always been the hardest is to navigate systems that have that as their backbone. Mm-hmm. Now, when I'm in schools that have like teachers college or things like that, those schools tends to be easier to navigate the work because they have a workshop approach and it's easier to work inside of a workshop than some of these other. So I think I'm with you 100%. It's about how do you clean things out a bit to make it practical, but we'll even start with just co-constructing criteria around behavior, around games, around like really simple things that the kids could wrap their heads around. And then they're giving each other feedback based on simple things. And then the teachers say, wow, that really worked. And that was fun. And the kids liked it. And then we start kind of inching into academics. So.
No, that's awesome. That's everything you're saying, I can see why you would want to talk about formative assessment, but that progress principle that Teresa Amabile talks about is really big there. I've got 3 questions from our Facebook page. So I'm going to hit you with these 3 questions. There are quite a few, but we just pulled these 3. So first one is, and they're great questions. What do you think will be the biggest challenge in the years ahead for educators dealing with the long-term effects that the pandemic has had on their students?
The thing that like our collaborative is worried about the most right now, and because we're hearing it, is I feel like the kids have learned a lot like over this pandemic. And I just worry that we're hearing learning loss and all this stuff. And, I'm in some schools that the learning loss hasn't been dramatic at all. And then you're like, okay, so then, what was the quality of education prior? That's always my second question. And then I'm in places where you really see like where the trauma of the pandemic has had on the full community. And like, I don't even know, like I know as a gay man, the trauma that I've experienced early on in life, I'm still living with today. And I'm concerned about that, you know, for many of communities that aren't as privileged as me. And I know that the pandemic has had a major impact on my life, like a negative impact. So I think it's the trauma that I worry about the most, and that are we really skilled to deal with that? And in a state like California, where you don't even have counselors or nurses in schools, and you know, then you're in a place like New York that has everything in the kitchen sink, like they're so blessed there. And so like, I think that is more of a worry for me now than ever before, because I just don't know if we're equipped. You know, I was working with a school and some teachers had passed away, and I had heard that one of the families, the kids were orphaned. And I just don't even know if we have an understanding yet as to the impact that this has had on so many communities.
So what I'm hearing you say, is it more concerning than this sort of cliche term we're hearing, learning loss, is baggage, for lack of better terms, trauma kids will be carrying with them. It's not what they've lost, it's what they're—
and teachers.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah,
and principals and families, right? I think the good that came from it is the connection to families, because I've heard that as a running theme with all of the schools we serve, that they're more connected to families than they've ever been. So I think there has been some gifts in this, and it's hard to think about it as a gift, but like I worry about that. And then I think about like our youngest learners is another group of kids that I'm concerned about the most, because of, you know, the lack of consistency with Reading Foundation and a lot of those skills that, you know, I'm talking to my teachers I was just on today, and like they're in 3rd grade and reading at the kindergarten level, you know, and like that is a new thing. It's not new for the school in particular, but it's the massive amount of kids that are in there. But I'm always saying, like, you know, we have to focus on what they did learn, because there's a lot of things that they've learned. And if we come back and we don't acknowledge the strengths that they're all bringing to the table, I think we're going to miss I know we're going to miss the boat.
Right. I'm with you all the way. I feel like whatever it takes, right? My attitude right now is whatever it takes, do it. You know, whatever it takes to get through, it's okay. And who knows all the things people are dealing with in terms of all that. And well, that's why I think coaching is going to be extremely important next year, because coaches are going to be people who help others deal with all of the complexities of life, you know. And you're right, teachers are dealing with it. They're worried about whether or not their partner's going to have a job, or they lost their job, the health of people. I mean, who knows what they've had to go through in the last year. It's interesting. On the other hand, I don't want to take us off track too much, but, you know, I've been reading quite a few different things, and people talk about the Civil War and what happened when Lincoln spoke after the Civil War about our better angels. And then I read about when the Second World War happened. You don't think about these things, or at least I don't.
Yeah.
That nobody knew what was going to happen when the Second World War was started. It's like, is this the end of civilization? And the human spirit carries on, you know. So I feel optimistic about the future, because we've survived a lot of other things, you know.
I do too. I really do. And I see more innovation in education now, and more risk taking, and without being judged, you know. And I think that was the missing element, is we always wanted risk taking, and really no one had time to judge anybody. So that's why nobody was judged and evaluated. But I've just seen teachers blossom, and I really hope that my greatest hope, and I really believe this, is we won't go back to some of the archaic practices that we were doing. I'll always want to use these digital tools for formative assessment now because I see the potential. It made me see the potential.
Right. My second question is kind of lengthy, so I'm going to have to read this one. What are some lessons we can take from the challenges schools have faced with distance learning? We were already started to answer this question for us.
Yeah.
That will help with schools that return to in-person instruction. What are some things you feel we should keep in our practice that we learned through this distance learning process? That was a new intervention for so many schools. You already mentioned, but maybe just go into a bit more specific detail, or well, take it however you want to take it.
Yeah, like I think we've been really navigating that in the early days of the pandemic. We were living in New York and Brooklyn at the time, and I was just really lucky because I had been working with all the executive superintendents of the New York City DOE, which are the superintendents of the superintendents.
Right.
So it was a really awesome experience for me, but I feel like what I've learned in working there and having a whole bunch of teachers that got to pilot things, because we were giving free PD and support through that whole time, because no one really knew what was going to happen. So budgets were on lockdown and all that. But what I've really learned is the asynchronous component, which we've now nicknamed asynchronous deliberate practice, you know, and the balance between synchronous and asynchronous, whether you're live on video or you're live in person, synchronous. But how do you maximize that synchronous time so that when kids could practice asynchronously, they know the expectations, they're using goal-directed asynchronous deliberate practice. So there's a goal in mind, and we've created like a platform where kids are like practicing, reflecting as they're practicing and setting goals inside of like a Nearpod or Pear Deck. So I really feel like there is a lot there. And I believe that when we're back in live instruction, there's so many answers there, because now I can meet with a small group and kids can be practicing asynchronously, and they can take me with them as the teacher. My voice can be on the recording. They can see me model strategies. We can create more resourceful learners. So I'm really excited about taking what we've learned, and now so much that we developed a whole tool for it, right? So I couldn't be happier and more excited. Like that's where I've grown the most over this last year, is just understanding that better.
Yeah, I think professional development, it will not be the same. It'll be radically different. We've learned that you can do things in 90-minute sections. You can do individualized work.
Yeah.
And there's so much you can do now that wasn't possible. Well, it was possible, but we didn't realize it, which is another interesting thing. Yeah. Well, the focus is on learning, and it's not on a performance, you know.
Yeah, you're right.
What's it going to take to make this work? Last question, then I want to ask you a couple more things. This one says, what are some of the more worrisome pain points teachers can avoid when attempting peer-to-peer learning?
Well, I think the first thing is just keep it really simple. Like, you know, like if you're in literacy, like lower the cognitive demand of the text, like use easier text with things, like when you're getting kids to peer assess. You know, I always am thinking about lowering the cognitive demand of content to teach into new structures. You know, so because if you're teaching a structure, you're teaching a structure. So the content is secondary. I think another thing to remember when you're engaging in peer assessment or even self-assessment, it's the feedback that kids need on the quality of that, right? And I think there's so many fun things that you can do with video where kids can record themselves peer assessing, and then they could go and watch the video and then determine was that quality or not. And of course you have to generate some criteria for quality, but you can do so many fun things that keep kids engaged. So I think the feedback on the process is also really important. And then just teaching kids how to listen, you know, and reflect back what their partner says. And like adult, we all need that too. But I think it's, you know, when I'm giving someone feedback, it's trying to put myself in their shoes and how that would feel. And so for me, it's opened up all of the dispositions of learning that are also important when we're teaching into peer assessment. So like going back to Costa's work regarding the habits of mind, or Guy Claxton's work, I think I've been re-energized with that work, through the peer assessment work, because now we're integrating it all together.
It's very, very cool. So what's something you want to share that I haven't had a chance to pull up with a question?
Oh man, I don't know. I have a swimsuit on because I'm going to go swimming in a minute.
Well, very good. 100 degrees, right?
Yeah, it's 100 degrees. I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm just so grateful that we kept all of our people employed, and we worked together like we've never worked before in the best interest of people. And I'm really proud of the team that we have. I know you are too. We were talking about that before, and how generous they've been with their time. And because I know they've worked longer hours than they've ever worked, and I worry about them, all the time, because they're my family. And so I think I just want to share like how proud I am of them and the schools we serve. Like I just don't think I'm a pretty emotional person, but I just don't think that the gratitude is out there for what teachers have done. I see all this horrible things being said about people that just had to do, and families. I don't think that we even understand the impact that this had on families, and we're not giving them the credit that they've deserved through this pandemic. So I'm just full of gratitude for the families, and for my collaborative, and for the principals that are still with us. And I've just seen people work harder than they've ever worked, and they're just not getting the acknowledgement that I think they deserve.
They work hard, and they've had to work hard at home too. I mean, on our team, our people are raising their kids at home because they're not able to go out into the community, and they're doing a full-time job, and they're essentially trying to do like 3 things at once. It's pretty much, it's
impossible.
Well, what you always feel is you're not doing enough. You're not doing it right. You're letting everybody down, and you're not at your best, and you're not, because you're trying to do the impossible.
Yeah, there's no way. And I've had that conversation a lot more. People, I just don't want to let you down. I'm like, you're not letting me down. Right. I promise you. I'm the last person you need to worry about.
Well, cool. How do people learn more about peer power and impact teams and all the work you do?
Well, I think just going to our website, www.thecorecollaborative.com. We have a YouTube channel. You can just search it. I think like if you really want to see the impact, seeing the student videos that we have, there's hundreds of them now. They've all been made by teachers, in their classrooms, and they've all analyzed those videos. So I think that's a really great place to go, is our YouTube channel. Obviously our Facebook got taken down. We have no idea why, but I'm not feeling Facebook anyway, so that might be all right. But I'd like to set up their Twitter, but I feel like YouTube is a really great place to go to see the impact firsthand. Right.
Well, and people will see you either virtually or live, but probably virtually, for our Teaching, Learning, Coaching conference. And
yeah, I'm excited about that.
I really do hope we could keep talking, because I learned a ton today. I was like, and I'm inspired and energized by what you had to say. So I'm grateful for your time. I was thinking, as you were talking about hybrid and asynchronous, that's kind of what we got going on here. This is a synchronous conversation, but we're gonna have to post it later. So we're kind of living out the times right now.
Aren't we?
That's right. Well, thanks so much. Enjoy your time in the pool. Sounds great.
I will.
All right.
Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for inviting me back to TLC.
I can't wait to have you back. It'll be wonderful. And I'll be watching for photos on Instagram of this pool. So I'll be looking.
Okay.
All right. Take care. Thanks so much.